Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Make yourself comfortable. We recommend getting a drink and headphones. Yes, headphones are essential. The first rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. The second rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. This flight will never stop. Welcome to Flight Club. Welcome to Flight Club. This flight will never stop.
Flight Club. Flight Club. Flight Club. Flight Club.
Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Make yourself comfortable. We recommend getting a drink and headphones. Yes, headphones are essential. The first rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. The second rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. This flight will never stop. This flight will never stop. Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Welcome to Flight Club. This flight will never stop.
Hello and welcome to Flight Club. My name's Klaus Leopold and I'm one of the hosts of this nice family show. No, it's not a family show, it's a show about flight levels. Co-host means there's another one.
Hello. Sorry, good evening. Yes, I was suddenly disappeared from the broadcast. Cool. Good evening and welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here tonight. We are looking forward to having a conversation with some very interesting guests who are going to tell us about what they have been doing at their organization, specifically talking about how they've been handling what they called their strategic reorganization. So yes, I would like to quickly introduce the two of them. So we have Sarah Perschemeyer and we have Bernd Kuliker. Can you say hi quickly?
Hi.
Awesome. It's wonderful to have you both here with us this evening, and we're looking forward to having some very interesting conversations. I want to just remind everybody before we start, if you're joining us for the first time, this is something that we do roughly every 2 weeks. And if you enjoy the content at any point, please feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. It'll really help us out in promoting this channel and getting more people involved and finding interesting guests and so on. So if you enjoy this, I will remind you again later on as well, but please do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe button. Cool. So as we said this evening, we have two wonderful guests who have been working at this company that some of you may have heard of called Bosch. I think actually we had a couple of weeks ago, we were all holding up different power tools and all kinds of different things because I think almost everybody, at least in Europe, is having some kind of a tool from Bosch or something along these lines. So yeah, cool. So first question, I want to kind of set the stage a bit and basically just say, well, what we're talking about here is that so often in an organization, what we do when we try to make some organizational changes, from my experience at least, is that we jump in and we make the changes before we really take the time to understand kind of all the problems and so on. It tends to be kind of more of a management thing, and then the people who are affected sort of find out a little bit afterwards. And what we need to do, I think, in my experience, is to actually involve some people in these conversations and maybe start with kind of some discussions and some other things before we get to the point of changing the organizational chart. Because my experience is that there's a lot more complexity in changing, who's on people's teams. Maybe they're friends with some of these people. All of these kind of things can be a little bit kind of complicated if you suddenly just working with different people. Take some time to kind of get everything up and running. So just to kind of set the stage, as I say, I'd like to maybe ask Sarah, can you give a little bit of background context on, just tell us a little bit about what was the circumstance within your organization, what was going on, why were you kind of considering dealing with this? Yeah, set the stage for us.
Yeah, sure, Cliff. Thank you. So actually, why did we want to change? So where do we come from? I guess a lot of people are not aware about Bosch Building Technologies because there's mobility and there's also power tools. But we as Building Technologies are there for delivering intelligent building technology solutions. So in my organization, I'm part of IT at BT Building Technologies. So we are there to really deliver and provide IT, but also enable digital business models. And especially in that area, it's a lot of change happens and a lot of VUCA happens. And so we were facing more and more issues and challenges, especially with providing the IT and also delivering what the users really want to have. So in our organization, we saw that we have a lot of pain points. And the pain points were, for example, knowledge, a loss of know-how, or also a slow time to market, or also quality issues. And so we started from within to check on what we can really do, what the topics are, so what the reasons are for those pain points we have, and what we can do. Yeah, that's where we come from.
Cool.
Okay.
Bernd, would you like to add anything to this?
I would like to add, for to set the stage that you understand why we are both here, I would like to add, my role is
Cool.
more to support that organization that Sarah described with the knowledge of flight levels, because they asked me, do you have an idea, because we would like to restructure our business on strategic level? And I said, the worst thing you can do is to set up an org chart and think about 6 months later why it doesn't work. My idea is we do a kind of simulation. What is the new workflow with the flight level approach, and how we can also build in the dynamic parts, the new dynamic parts, because the business model of BT is changing very often, very fast, because they're living in a VUCA world. And so I come up with the flight level approach and try to convince them, and then we start a journey together.
I do find this interesting, how often I've been at a number of organizations from the inside when some sort of restructure has taken place, and this kind of rearranging the org chart is often one of the sort of the key milestones, if you will, and that's almost in many cases kind of the end of this discussion. And from my experience is that so often, the communication loops and kind of getting people kind of set up and actually working, it's almost as if drawing a line in the HR system somehow magically gets people working together. I guess maybe that's the assumption, or I don't know. But can you tell us a little bit about what was your experience? I mean, you've obviously been through, restructures in the past. What are some of the pain points of this kind of approach of doing things? What have you seen kind of go wrong or not work so well in the past?
So I guess, I don't know if the question was to Bernd or myself, so I will just take it. Well, we did this in the past, actually. So we saw, okay, there we have challenges, we have problems, we want to restructure, and we want to change something. So we just try to change the organization. For example, we said, okay, people need some kind of a home, so we will create tribes, and everybody has a home. And we thought, okay, the dedication of the resources and the people to a tribe will solve all our problems. But in fact, what we did is we just took our way of working and did not change the way of working, but we only changed the outside. So in Germany we have a saying, I don't know how to say it in English, it's alter Wein in neuen Schläuchen. It's old wine in new bottles, and it does not change anything at all. So this is also what I think is the problem when we really try to change the organization first, that we don't change the way of working, which is mostly the problem for all the challenges and pain points you have.
But I think in the end, I also see this very often, that when we start to change, we change the org chart. It's maybe because we see the org chart, we see that people are somehow, I don't know, structured in teams. I know this is my colleague, and now this is my colleague or my teammate. So I think this change is somehow visible, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's maybe why we think, okay, we should do it like this. But you approached it differently, right? So you did not change the org chart first, but what did you actually change?
Yeah, so the first thing we thought was, okay, most of the problems we have are from the projects we have. So we have projects, and people are on the project, and then we will close the projects, and the people will go to different projects, and then we have to ramp up the projects again, and we have people who do operations, so design and build, which we have in the project is totally disjunct from the run. So also the issues there. So we said in the first place, okay, let's change our way of working. We want to have not projects anymore, but we want to go from project to product. So to get a product approach with continuous delivery. And then we saw, okay, when we just shape a team around a product, in an ideal world, we would have products who are totally self-organized, self-dependent, with no dependencies to other products or people or whatever. But the truth is, sorry to say, we are not in an ideal world. We always have dependencies. So we were looking for an approach which is pragmatic, which is not something where we have to change now the whole org chart, and also where we don't have to follow a lot of guidelines, rules, new roles, whatever, and that can help us really doing this coordination for all those product teams. And so we started doing it on a smaller scale. So we started with those products, and then we saw, okay, we have now the dependencies to other products, and we need to coordinate it end to end. So we checked on what can we do, and we checked less, we checked safe, we checked whatever there is. And then one day a colleague came and said, hey, I met this guy from, he's an agile coach and flight level coach, and he told me about flight levels, and that's a really cool thing. And so that's how I met Bernd. And he told us the first time about the flight levels, and then we said, okay, wow, that sounds really down to earth, very pragmatic, and let's try this.
That sounds like a perfect sales pitch that you did, Bernd. So what did you promise them, or what did you tell them?
I would like to add something.
Sure.
So that is typically the starting point how we get in touch with our customers. And the problem is, if you compare one single project and pilot one single project, everything would like to work. But to manage the complexity, you need a different approach to understand where's the complexity. Is it on a dependency level on teams? Is it dependency level on products and solution? And you need a way to visualize that dependency and come to trade-off decisions. And that is the reason why we use that flight level approach in the first steps. And after that steps, it can come to a conclusion. We use Kanban boards, or we use SAFe for that, managing that complexity. But we do before the simulation. And the best thing to do this is also think not OPAP, the organization defines the processes in the old way. We think it different. We define the business, then the portfolio, the architecture of the portfolio, and then we start with the value chain thinking with the flight level approach. And that is, I think, the key to also involve the people, because I call this a white paper workshop. No one knows what is the result. If you look on other models, you see the result. In a flight level thinking approach, you saw the white paper and tell the people, your customer, please make your picture.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
I think this is so important for several reasons, and one of the things that I've seen so often is that the reorg, or the solution that is designed, the pain points that are being addressed, are often something that is addressed only by the people who are involved in designing the change. And this is not super surprising, because so often what happens is that it's just the management who are involved in this discussion. So there's actually a great question from Carmen Knippenberg, who's asking this question. And just a reminder to everybody, ask questions in the chat as we're going. We'll weave them into the conversation. So thank you, Carmen, for taking the initiative. Question is, who defines the pain points in your situation, and how did you work on them? Who worked on them, and how did you work on them? Because I think this is a really cool question.
Well, actually, we asked in our organization. So we asked the team members, what are you facing? What challenges are you facing? Where do you see pain points? We also asked some of our internal customers. So we got a lot of feedback, which was sometimes very hard also to hear, but it was very open. And we collected them, and we grouped them, and then we had quite a very good picture, of how it is and how the situation is today. And actually, we did then a small workshop with some team members from different areas, and we thought about, okay, what can we change? What can we make better? And there, the first time this project to product approach came up, and so so it just went on rolling. That's how we approached this. And actually, also many people who named those pain points we have now, and we try to really involve also in the whole flight level workshops, bring them in, get their feedback, not only their feedback, but also get them to work together with us, because it's just not possible from you need the people for it.
Yeah. So if I try to summarize so far, so there were some problems, there were some pain points, right? And there are multiple ways how you could approach it. So you decided, okay, you don't want to change the org chart, and you also didn't want to take like a predefined solution, like I don't know, SAFe or something like this, which says, okay, that's how your organization is going to look like. But a guy named Bernd convinced you with, there's a white paper. What did you do with this white paper? So, I mean, if you did not install one of these frameworks, you didn't change the org chart, but what did you actually do?
This is the most challenging part for guys like me who convinced an organization how to start. And the key is, in my point of view, we talk about scenarios, possible scenarios. That means, what is the highest flight level that we would like to focus on? Is it customer journey? Is it product line approach? Do we have solution approach, or do we have portfolio management? And then engage your customer to figure out 2-3 proposals about possible flight level architecture, and figure out with some criteria that coming from the customer to benchmark the best working system on that level, and also map the current pain points. You can say, with that kind of flight level architecture, what pain points we can eliminate or making smaller, or we can make it visible to deal with that if we have that flight levels ongoing. And that is, I think, is the key.
Yeah. So, and this is when you say you didn't change the org chart, what you did, you basically went through the operational structure into the organization. So what we are generating value. So this is how you decided actually what your flight level systems are.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a really hard thing. So we spent 4 workshop days, mostly 4 workshop days, on just going through, okay, what is our working stream? Yeah, what's our chain? What value do we generate, and how and what steps are we doing that? We had a lot of discussions. It was very it was very interesting and also challenging, because we really had to look very deeply, and we had to make everything clear, and we had to bring everything on top, and we had really to check on our way of working together. And that transparency is sometimes hard and painful, but it helps in the end a lot. So I think with Bernd it was 4 days very, very with a lot of fire.
But I think that's exactly the challenging part. So we said before, okay, you can change the org chart, so everything is immediately visible. But the operational structure, like how we are actually doing the work, is usually not visible in organizations. I mean, what you see is, no matter which office door you are opening, there's someone sitting in front of a computer doing like this. And what we try to do with the flight level systems architecture is we try to make the operational the operational structure actually visible. And what you said before, Bernd, that's also something how I approach this all the time. So it's not like it's more like a simulation that we are doing. So you can basically somehow simulate based on different assumptions of what's in the center of your operational structure, how work is actually flowing through the system. So in the end, flight levels systems architecture is a big organizational development simulator, which is interesting.
And what I would like to tell is the key is that you have, let me say, a favorite architecture, and then you think about what triggers that architecture. And if you simulate it with the flight routes, you can see more or less, if you have the simulations in place, the patterns, the common patterns, the difference of the patterns, and you see, as an expert like Klaus or Cliff, you see the workflows, and you can help the people to ask really good questions about, oh, this is the possible workflow if we have that setting and that simulation. Is it quick enough? Is it good enough? Does it address pain points?
Yeah.
And
There's actually a question that
cool thing. Sorry.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. There's an interesting question that I find kind of connects to this. So Wayne Hetherington is asking, he says, teams may not be able to see the bigger picture. How do you decide which problems need to be solved and who needs to be included? And my assumption is that part of what's behind there is that very often the teams are not necessarily aware of the value streams or the product streams or the broader, bigger picture of what's going on. And my experience is that when you actually do this in the organization, you actually see a lot of positive effects from people having that big picture. So my assumption is that this exercise is actually helpful for addressing part of that challenge. But I want to open the question to you and see what do you take from this? You know, how did you decide, and what was your perception of how the teams were involved, and what was their take on things?
Mm. I like the question very much because it shows exactly the problems we have. People within the teams, be it project teams, product teams, whatever, they see there's ecosystem, but they are not aware about all the challenges and boundaries and dependencies to the outside. And yeah, absolutely. So so you have to include the people very soon, and for sure there are people always in the organizations who have the bigger picture. So mostly it's then in the management somehow, but also from there are people who have the bigger picture, be it people who always, for example, are doing cross topics that are involved in many other topics, or yeah, managers or whatever. And then you have really to include the people from the teams and make them aware, because mostly they're just not aware. They will understand if they see it, but so it's all about shaping this awareness about the problems we are facing.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's more also to engage the people, because the team members ask about what's in for me, and the thing what we can tell is you can shape a little bit the way of working, and if we do have a good connection from the strategy idea down to the team level, they know why they doing things and what is the small piece I do for the bigger thing. And I think this is also worth and motivates people to really know that is the reason why I'm doing that work today. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's so important, and I think part of it is often what we see is you can end up with a situation where the restructure or the cultural changes, and especially if you think of something like Scrum, very often I've seen adopted sort of from the edges of the organization and sort of flowing in, and then it starts to hit a point where, you know, maybe the managers are not necessarily as involved, and there's some sort of, yeah, there's this thing over here that the teams are doing. I'm curious, there's actually two questions. So Jürgen Dittmar is asking, he's saying, how is the top management team involved? And then I'll come to Carmen's question as well in a minute. But how did you involve the managers in this side? Because I think, you know, it's not just about the teams and it's not just about the managers. We actually want to bring all of them together. That connection is what I see as important.
Mm.
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was a lot grassroots initiative, to be honest. But as soon as we then really worked on the flight level, so we had at least the CIO involved, and also then we had a very good support from our chief digital officer. So we did involve them. And we had the chance to really try things out. It's the wrong saying, but really to go forward and just do it. Yeah. So, but then later we also this is also what we are doing right now. We're getting more and more people involved from business side, also there from top management. That's quite That's still an ongoing process, but yeah, we are onto that topic.
Yeah, Sarah, typically the customers start with flight level 2 and flight level 1 talk and said, yeah, we have something to do also with the strategy level, but let us first evaluate that we understand our working system, and then we come up with good questions and good proposals how we can connect the strategy level. And I think this is a very typical way. Ideally, we wish that we have also at the beginning, flight level 3, the management involved for that work. But let me say, it takes some time to see how it works on team level, on coordination level, and then step by step, the people are convinced there's a kind of buy-in for the strategy level. And this is exactly what happens the last months at that organization from Sarah.
Another question from the chat. Mike Freislich is asking, he says, what was the biggest challenge with the change and how did you overcome it? Nice, easy question.
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. So, there were a lot of challenges. First of all, mindset topics. So one challenge is really to make people aware of all those dependencies, because they are saying sometimes, well, but it's working right now. Why do I have to make it so complicated now and talk with other people? I can just do what I do. So getting there the awareness, and we still did not overcome that. So that's for sure. So we're still working on it. I think, yeah, there's a lot of really a lot of resistance for this whole change from the organization. So even some people are very dedicated to driving it, yet to really doing the work and bringing it to the people. So making a concept is quite easy, but then really implementing it, this is quite a challenge, because you have to have you have to have someone who burns for it, because it's not fun. Sometimes it's really not fun. And I think also a challenge was and is still to make people aware that even if you are only coordinating, this is work. So that it's not only work to write code, or it's not only work to write concepts, but also coordinating is work. That was something I learned, for example. Yeah. But overall, a really good question. I think that getting everyone involved and getting everyone on board and really doing the implementation of the whole thing.
I think introducing the flight levels approach is not only make new color on the walls of your room, it's changing the room, and it's also changing the way of working and the behavior. And I think this is a big challenge to explain to people what is the new behavior with the change of way of work we would like to see. And this is finally what we call mindset. But I think this is the biggest challenge, to explain the new behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
I often have to remind people that the changes that we're making inside an organization, they consume the same capacity that is spent on whatever else you were doing before. So, as Klaus was saying, if you're typing or if you're coordinating, like you're talking about, Sarah, whatever people were doing before. And so there can be some amount of just like, that sounds like extra work, because, I know the way it works right now. And sometimes change is a little bit confusing and difficult. And I really like what you talked about at the beginning, is, taking people on the journey and trying to explain to them, here are the things, and involve them into the discussion. These are the challenges we see. What do you see? This kind of an approach, because my experience has been very much that involving people in it, even if you don't necessarily do exactly what they suggest, just the fact that they get to contribute to it makes quite a big difference to how people will feel about it a little bit further down the line. So, yeah. And as Mike says, change is hard. It's easy. We all make New Year's resolutions on 1 January, and we're gonna drink less beer or go to the gym, all of these kind of things. A few months later, actually doing it, this is the hard part. It's easy to come up with the goal and the plan, but actually executing it is always much more difficult. So I want to quickly pause and remind everybody about Flight Club. So if you'd like to stay in the loop, I will share very quickly on the YouTube, on the chat, a link for the meetup. So if you're interested, sign up on the meetup group. And you will get announcements about future events. We also know from the YouTube stats that about 78% of you are not actually subscribed to the YouTube channel. So this is your next reminder. Hit the subscribe, hit the like button. If you're enjoying the content, it'll really help us out. So yeah, jump on the meetup group and hit the subscribe button. Cool. So I want to change the topic ever so slightly. We talked before, when we were doing our preparation, you talked about this idea of the difference between stable and dynamic changes. And my understanding was this was a little bit of a situation where, you wanted to change something from a very stable environment, or you wanted to maybe have a little bit of fluctuation. Can you give a little bit of context? What do you see as the difference between these two, and what was important about this for you?
Yeah, from my point of view, I have from the stable side, the stable thing is you can describe with processes, you can define roles so that you can do the old way of working with that org chart. But if the world outside is getting more and more dynamic, the speed of change outside the world is getting higher, and we have to follow up that speed inside our organization. We have to think about what is the dynamic part. We don't need some rules or some processes. We need more some principles or some good communication on coordination level. And then to deal with the dynamic part that happens, you can't foresee on daily basis. And that is the reason why we introduced that flight level approach to deal with that dynamic part. That is no rule, no process, and no need for a process.
Yeah.
Yeah, also that, so I mean, later since last year, we all know how dynamic everything is, and how uncertain everything is, and really, I've been in such an environment trying to work in the same way and expect different results. It's just, yeah, insanity, stupid. So it's just not working. So you have to adjust somehow your way of working to fit this uncertainty, and to also be able to adjust to the dynamic part. But then again, as Bernd said, where are we dynamic, and where do we need to be stable, and where shall we be able to adjust then?
I think that's so important, because I've seen so often that either a restructure is changing everything, and that for me, I don't know if everyone knows the metaphor, but it's a little bit like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you know this metaphor. But the other part of it is also that very often we have to deal with different types of work. There's stuff that is very stable and predictable, and we know the system. And there's other stuff where it might be a little bit more chaotic, or the results are unknown. We're doing some sort of more discovery or innovation type work. And I think it's very dangerous for an organization to go, kind of assume that you only work in one way or the other. And very often there is a little bit of space where you want to kind of, let's try something crazy and see what happens over here. Maybe we find something cool and new, but let's not do that, with the credit card payment data, or, with our financial reports. So yeah, I think it's helpful to think about this in two different ways. So I wanted to ask a question from Silke. Silke Boos is asking, she says, is there already feedback from your customers or something that has changed? Maybe something's gotten better. What has been the response so far?
So not really so we only have internal customers. The first thing to say, we did get feedback from business side, so from user department side, for those two products we have now on board, and also in the level approach. This was very good. What they do like is really a very structured approach, and also the possibility to get an overall view over all topics, priorities, stuff that comes in. So the transparency is very good, and this was also highlighted by our business departments. Yes.
That makes sense. Cool. Yeah, I think so. It's so important to make sure that we're actually getting feedback from the people that are affected. And so I'm curious. The question was framed very much about customers. I'm curious, what are some of the things that folks have been saying? Sort of positive impacts or outcomes or this kind of a thing internally as well. So maybe the people inside the organization, managers, leaders, whoever around.
Mm-hmm. So we are in the process of establishing everything. We have a part that's already up and running and also using the flight levels, and other part which is still in the old world. So right now, for some people, it's still very difficult and challenging because we are in a transition phase. But for the teams which are up and running, we receive very good feedback. Because we also changed the way of, so it's not only flight levels, but we also changed the teams and the way of working and agile teams. So here the feedback is very good because it's more, how do I say? So it's very transparent. It makes everything very clear for everyone. Everybody understands for what and what topic and what strategic topic he's working, or legal topic he's working or she's working. So that's a very good thing. Also, the overall transparency increases with every day, and which is the first step really to getting things done. Yeah. But I really have to say this also, we are not yet, it's not completely through. So we are still in the transition from the old world into the new world and facing a lot of challenges there. But for the part which is already in the new world, the teams, the people who are working on it, but also our stakeholders give very good feedback.
Yeah, but I think you just mentioned something indirectly regarding your change process, if I get you right. So you said, okay, it's not fully fledged out already. So what we usually do with flight levels quite a lot is, so we build this flight level systems architecture. Flight level systems architecture basically tells you, okay, what are the flight level 1, 2, 3 systems in your organization, and how does actually workflow through these systems and how are they connected, right? And now we actually know, okay, these are all the systems that we could build. So when you say it's not fully done, this transformation kind of thing, what I hear is you didn't do like a big bang. Like, okay, this is all the systems we need to build, and now let's build all the systems and switch them on and everything will be fine. So it was more like a gradual process. Is this correct?
Exactly. So we were thinking about it and we realized very soon this is just impossible. It's just impossible. So, and what we rather did is we said, okay, let's make a little thingy and let's take a little pilot product and let's just ramp it up. And also when we started, we realized that we can use the flight levels and also the flight level 2 board and the whole process and workflow. We can use it also for the teams which are not yet in the new structure. So it's independent. We can use it anyway. And that's exactly what we are doing now. So we have the new products, we have old teams, we have the flight level process, and all new requirements, all new epics are coming through the flight levels, whether they are using the old teams or the new teams.
Yeah, but I think this is so important, and I think not so many people know about this. So in the end, what you're doing is you're simulating how your organization could work. So in terms of risk, you are working on paper, right? So you're not doing something else. That's the first step. And the next step is that it's not like, okay, we have to like pull a switch or something like this, and then everything changes immediately. So when it comes to making the whole organization a little bit agile, it's also about incremental change. So this is somehow tied into the change process, and that's actually how we also recommend how you should do this. And the point is, you're now able to really set up an agile change process, because what you're doing is you're somehow gradually changing parts of your organization, and then you're feeding back your experience to, let's say, the organizational level. And this means you can even tweak like your systems architecture because you've learned something, right? And then you incrementally go do the next step and the next step and the next step. And in terms of risk, that's just like just awesome in the end, right? So because the risk is really very low, it's not like, okay, let's change everything and see if it works or not.
And this is exactly what happens if we started pilots, that we had a better cross-team talk, if Sarah remember, and we integrate cross teams different. And the next talk is starting how we can change a little bit the portfolio management in a way that we need better if we get more and more projects and products in. And that is exactly the talk. To avoid that big bang, and the people who are on the pilot, they are said that can work, and they show that can work, and then the others see that success and can ask question, can we participate? This is exactly what happened in that phase that Sarah described.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah.
So there's a cool question from the chat. Sorry, Sarah, were you going to say something?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Chloe Schmidt is asking, she says, my corporation or organization is going through a reorg right now, and it's a mess. Surprise. What do you recommend, or what do you think are some good first steps that you would suggest if she's trying to make things a little bit less messy, perhaps?
Yeah, I think the first steps is really understand your pain points, why we would like to doing that change, that transformation. Is it a pressure from outside? Is it a pressure from inside? Is it a pressure from the team members who are frustrated? So bring it up to pain points, and then think about what could be a system in the future. We call it fit for future system, and then start that white paper approach and do some simulations and perspective to see how it works for our current business and the future business, and start simulating. And I think this is a pure 3C process, card conversation, confirmation with the people. Because otherwise, if I paint one picture, the people said they always spend the energy to telling me why I'm wrong. And this is not working in that situation. It's better to involve the people, get them the white paper, explain it how it works, bring the trigger points, bring the pain points, and then start simulation. It's a better approach.
Yeah. I think that resonates so much with my experience. So specifically thinking of one of the restructures that I worked on inside Spotify, was exactly what you described. Is basically we build something, we involve some people, we discuss it, we see what the pain points are, we do another pass, this kind of a thing. Because what I'd seen happen so many times before, and I think a lot of us have seen this, is you end up in a situation where there's some sort of major change that is underway. It doesn't necessarily have to be a restructure, but the challenge is that not everybody who is affected by this change even necessarily understands what the problem is that's being addressed, or agrees that that's even an important problem to solve. And if that's the case, arguing about solutions or trying to convince people that it's a good idea, you already have several steps back that you can start. And so what I think is so important is, as you described, there's ways to basically get folks on board with understanding, okay, here are the problems that I see, here are the problems that you see. Now we need to sort of acknowledge that there's probably more here than we can address. How do we pick sensibly and then move forward? And I've seen completely night and day difference between how folks are involved in that kind of approach.
And in that phase, it's so important that really engage the people to understand, don't copy. You can see how Spotify solves the problem, but please don't copy, because it's not the same situation. And this happens very often. And I think better is to understand and bring that people to understand the situation and then decide what is next.
Yeah. I mean, that's also why we call flight levels not a framework or something like this. We call it the thinking model. I know it sounds so unsexy. But I think that's what it is in the end. So you really need to understand what's going on in your organization, and based on this, make the changes. Yeah. And we didn't start with you didn't start with the org chart. That's also an important thing. We talked about this already, but nobody says that you never ever change the org chart, right? So what I see quite often in many organizations, so they start with a flightable systems architecture, and then basically the org chart remains the same, but people are somehow coordinating around their flows, which actually generates value for the customer. And then when they figure out, okay, now everything somehow runs smoothly, well, nobody says that you can change the org chart later, but you have like a proof. Now it's working actually. And now we change the org chart. And there's a question from Silke again, which somehow goes into this direction where she's asking, okay, did you actually adapt the organization already in terms of the org chart, or is it still like the same? Like we've heard from the Bosch guys in Brazil last time. They didn't change the org chart.
So we did not yet change it, no, not yet. So I think as soon as we have everyone on board and all teams also on board and up and running, I'm pretty sure that will be the next step, because it does make sense. It does make sense, but we, exactly as you, Klaus, said, we want to have the experience, we want to learn, and then we can also still, so we are still in a feedback loop, so we are still adapting and we want to learn, and then as a last step, this should be a consequence to really then change.
Yeah, it's quite cost effective actually. And,
absolutely.
In terms of risk, it's very low. Yeah, cool.
And you reduce the risk, because if you change new way of working, if you change the org chart, you don't know your team members, where I'm in, which department I am in. I think this is a lot of pain of the people. But if you said we don't change the org chart, but we change the way of working, and if we have learned so far, then we make a wise decision to modify the org chart, but in a way it helps all of them. And I think this is a better approach to start all things in parallel and make the people angry, and also they don't know exactly what is my future and have fear about that change.
Yeah.
I've seen this so many times. Because previously a lot of my consulting work is people contact me because they're doing something with a Spotify model or something like this. And usually what's happened is that there's some kind of a large restructure on the go. They've introduced tribes and squads. They've got Agile in there for the first time. They've got a bunch of new managers. They're changing all the processes. And there's a whole bunch of technology stuff. And of course, all of the work that they were doing before, and maybe even some new things because it's, starts at the beginning of the year or something like this. What this looks like to me is really a challenge of, just like you said now, you're throwing so many different things in the mix. So I'm curious, less about the specific things that you picked, but how did you go about in the organization really getting the org to focus just on slightly less than trying to change everything? Because, as we know, boiling the ocean is hard. How did you create that focus on just the right amount of change?
That's a good question. How did we do that? Well, we really try to think of, okay, what is the logical next step? What is the next step we should focus on? And really try to get people on board from different teams to work on exactly that topic. And as soon as we had the first thing set up and running, we would then focus on the next thing. I have to say there were definitely voices in our organization that said, yeah, but this and that, it's not yet 100% perfect. And we have to think about this and that. And what about a test concept? And what about whatever? And actually, we just ignored them and we just started. So we went from one step after the other. We only see always what's the next step, and then we go the step, and then after that we see the next step. So But yeah, it's really hard to say how. I mean, sometimes you have just to you just need to do it. So just do it, and even ignore voices from colleagues, bosses, whoever, and just do it. And yeah, so you have to be brave and do it. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah,
And
I think
maybe-
it's so important. Just nice ideas on a whiteboard, theories on paper, this kind of thing. At some point, you have to turn it into real. And when you start doing it in real life, then you somehow see, oh, okay, things are a little bit different in practice to how they were in theory. So, Bernd, you were going to say something.
I would like only to add, let me say, the situation of the Sarah's organization, we call it, this is a brownfield approach. That means we have an established organization with a lot of process, with a lot of understanding how we do the products, the old products, but not so far the new products, but they learn something. And then we call this brownfield approach. I think this is the thing that I explained. The best way is to do it step by step, not complete big bang. And then we have sometimes also young companies, we call it greenfield approach, starting with 10 people, have success with one product, then you have typically no problems with the dependencies management. Then they add some new products, new services, and then that dependency problem can come. And in that case, I think then you can do a big bang approach because you scale up from 10 people to 15. But in the case of Sarah's organization, there are 400, 600 people. It's not so easy to make that big bang approach. And we call that brownfield approach, in the way that Sarah explained.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And I think often we sort of assume that if we're starting from scratch, we're somehow starting from a white piece of paper. But as I often remind people, the fields might still be a little bit brown, even when you're dealing with kind of new hires or a completely new organization, because people come with the assumptions and the understandings that they have from the previous org or the previous company or the team or that sort of thing. And so it's important to remember that we have to go through this process of working with the humans to actually align our different perspectives, because we can just be standing on different sides of the problem or different perspectives, but bringing those together, that's really the power that I see inside using this approach with flight levels. Yeah. So we have more or less sort of coming towards the end. So I have a couple of questions that I want to share, but I want to just quickly drop a link for those of you who are interested. Maybe you're joining for the first time, or you don't know so much about flight levels. We have a really simple way that you can learn and get kind of a good taster, kind of like a little bit more than an amuse-bouche or a starter or something like this, but kind of get you going. It's about half a day's worth of work. It's completely online and self-paced. I'll stick a link in the chat. There's a discount code there. You get 20% off, and it's already quite cheap anyway. Grab a look if this sounds interesting to you, or you'd like to know a little bit more about flight levels and fill in some of the details that you may have questions about. Cool. Then, moving on, I have 2 more questions that I'd like to ask specifically. So Oliver Perner is asking, he says, have you experienced something like the C-level still wants to decide on everything on this level 2 instead of working or focusing their attention on level 3? I'm curious, have you experienced this, and what are you doing about it if you have?
So I have to say we have the level 3 not yet up and running. So this is actually the next step, what we are focusing on soon in May, hopefully. But what we are experiencing is still old patterns of behavior, and people just say, yeah, but this is a very strategic topic, we have to do it. So we know our strategic topics. We don't have a flight level 3 board yet, but they are coming down. So we are experiencing people still wanting to somehow influence priorities, influence topics in the flight level 2 board. Yes, but I have a feeling that this will get better.
And my experience is, my wish is that we bring also that C-level sometimes to the flight level 2 level for things who are not committed so far, but in progress on a modern portfolio management. and then they can decide, but together with the people. And some very important strategy things you can do on the flight level 3, but to bring it more on flight level 2, but not to influence, only to use their knowledge for the not committed portfolio things. And I think this is a good approach to involve them and to avoid control of teams. Yeah, this is the question behind. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Something just to add to that I found fascinating a number of times with building something like a flight level 2, and I think specifically of some work I did with an insurance company in South Africa quite a few years ago. Actually, it was how Klaus and I originally met. Was Klaus was doing some training with the same client that I was consulting with. Yeah. Anyway, so what happened there was that we had built this level 2 system across about 100 and something odd people, and quite often what would happen was the CFO would walk past, and he would look at this board and go, "Wow, are you really working on all of this stuff?" And of course, the answer was no. We were being asked to work on it, but it wasn't actually possible. And so what started happening was that the CFO was actually starting to challenge some of this stuff and say, actually, we need to get more focused. We can't do all of this. Turns out some of those projects, and that visibility actually just creates some of that opportunity for people to be able to get involved. And I think, we talked a little bit earlier about how maybe some of the teams lack certain perspectives, but I think often the management can lack certain perspectives as well. And basically that we need to find some ways to be able to blend this together and building a picture that we can understand as a sort of a universal truth with more perspectives built into it creates a situation where things can get a lot better and a lot more coherent with what's actually happening on the ground. Cool. Pablo, I see your question. I will answer you very shortly in the chat. I want to ask one last question, which is from Florian. Florian Muka is saying, as a kind of a really nice closing question, exactly. So I will use his instead of the one that I had thought of. He says, what did you learn on the overall journey so far that in retrospect you would now do differently? And as a continuation to that, what turned out to be a bit of a surprise? And I'd like to actually ask the question to both of you, if that's okay. So
I would like to start with the answer, because I remember in one workshop that Sarah told me, because Klaus explained so good, that we have the coordination level, and some people think at the beginning on coordination level, you move only cards, but you don't work for that system. So you spend typically 20% of your system work on that level. And that was the huge surprising part that Sarah told me, hey, we have also to do some work on coordination level, not only coordinating, also work on that level. And this is the surprising part for me as a coach.
Oops.
Okay. What would I do different, or what would we do differently in retrospective? I guess really it's all about the people and the communication. So we did communicate a lot, but even if you think you're communicating a lot, do it more. That's really, it's really like that, because every time I think, okay, but we did say it already 10 times, people still don't understand. So really trying more, get people on board even more. Yeah.
So is this something similar like Hofstadter's law? If you think, no, it's late, it will be later. If you think you're communicating enough, you need to communicate more, like Sarah's law. Yeah, kind of like this.
Exactly. Yeah, and also involve the stakeholders around even more. Yeah, even more also from the beginning. Get there more people on board. This is something I would do differently now.
Yeah, and I think it's Hofstadter's law. If I'm not correct, so it always takes longer as you expect, even if you consider Hofstadter's law. So this is like Sarah's law. You always need to communicate more, even if you consider Sarah's law. No, I got it. Yeah. Cool.
So I think that's a great place to wrap up. We are also actually exactly on time. I take one last opportunity to remind everybody, if you enjoyed the show, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe. And of course, as we like to joke, the first rule of Flight Club is to always talk about Flight Club. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your auntie, your cousins, your work colleagues, and so on. You've got the link for the meetup group already in the chat. I'll post it again now. And we'd love to see you again next week. The next 2 episodes are actually scheduled already, and you can see the dates. The topics are soon to be announced, but you will see the upcoming guests. And of course, as I say, we do these shows roughly once every 2 weeks. So yeah, thank you to everyone for joining us this evening, and especially thank you to Sarah and Bernd for being our wonderful guests and taking the time to share with us all the interesting insights and your experiences along the way. It's been really cool to have both of you, and I've enjoyed meeting you and having this conversation. So thank you so much for joining. Yeah, cool.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Cool. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Cheers.